What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the North Leeds Jitz podcast. This time in our new glamorous studio at the East Midlands Hotel. So I'm with Professor Lewis. We've just had an interesting day with the team, the wider GB community team, at the business conference for everyone in the UK. And we had people from, like Professor Douglas, who's been on the podcast from Dubai here. So people were coming from all over. And thought maybe we could talk a little bit about that because it's something that a lot of students won't really even know happens, because I'm sure they don't know that you're probably away doing a business conference today. But
probably not. No, I suppose it's something that happens annually, isn't it? Like, we come together to see how we can improve the schools, learn from each other, share problems and
I think
successes. Funnily
enough, I don't know about you, but like sometimes it's not even in the conference that I learn the most. It's like having the conversations with you or with other school in like the breakaway bits where you really just talk about the things that you might be struggling with or ideas that you have, and you hash it out with other people who are in the same thing. And then the conference is almost there just as like a facilitative role.
Yeah, it just it's a reason for the people to come together. But I mean, like, even in the car journey down, we had some great conversations about how you do things, how we do things. And then, you might not necessarily do things the same way, but then you see things that you could take from what I do, or we see things that we could take from what you do. So I think it's always really good. It's kind of the appointment of being here is just what kind of like makes you show up to do it. Otherwise, it never happens.
What I thought was there were some good parts of the conference though, like Professor Mike did a good speech at the end of the
it was a good speech.
Did his his talk that he gave, so that was really cool. You guys missed out on that one. So then what was one of my favourite bits? Professor Graham gave a good speech as well.
Yeah, he gave a good speech. That was pretty good.
So GB Warrington won the CompNet, which, if you guys don't know what that is, it's the Gracie Barra only tournament. So it's only entered by, you're only allowed to enter it for like GB schools, and it's a very professionally run tournament. And something that, to be honest, around it we don't particularly support. Like, not as in like we're anti-CompNet or something. It's just like we generally just go to the Leeds competition because of a willingness to we've not got much of a willingness to travel. But I think from what they were saying, like, it would be cool actually just even if we just spend, if it's £500 to hire a coach for 30 plus people and we all stick in like 15 quid or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then it's much more palatable to be like, okay, well, you're getting picked up at the academy, drop back off at the academy. You don't have to worry about parking or the stress of driving. Just literally focus on getting ready for competition, and we'll all go down as a team. Like, that is a bit more interesting to me. Yeah,
I agree. I thought that as well. Definitely. I think we sent a few competitors this year after the meetings that we had, like the school owners meetings that we'd had earlier in the year. But similarly, it's kind of location-wise, they're not really like the best positioned for the northern schools, but kind of feel like they're not going to get any better if we don't show up and support. It's kind of like, that's kind of the message I got today, and I kind of agree with it really. So similar to you, like, we support kind of a lot of the Empire competitions because they're local, but I think probably have a big push on it on 2024 and try and take a team down. I think the coach idea is good.
Something that's was interesting, they were talking about doing a grassroots, like, start your own kind of CompNet, or like be a smaller version of CompNet, which would still be supported and like you get points. So like Professor Graham's speech that we mentioned was because he won, like Gracie Barra Warrington won the CompNet this year, so like the overall UK CompNet.
Scored the most points.
Yes, and you would still score points if you did like some kind of grassroots thing. And at the smallest level, we did that last year or the year before, I can't remember.
Yeah, last year. The Inns Club.
Yeah, we had the Inns Club. And if you think about just the schools within like a 5 to 10 mile radius of like Leeds, you get in Harrogate in there, you get in Roundhay, Horsforth, you got Wakefield, you got
Huddersfield maybe.
Yeah,
probably a bit further
Bradford.
Bradford.
There's you easily got 1,500 people within Gracie Barra that you know, if you want to do something, like it's a good area for it. Like, and then if you go a bit further out, you got York, Barnsley, like those kind of places as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not too crazy to, you know, if there was a comp night in York, like I would definitely probably be like, oh, the guys, let's do something York.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So
I'd
that
agree
could be a
with
good
that.
option in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right there, mate. I think the good thing as well that they mentioned, obviously, that not like to be part of the GB Ambassadors program, you have to do the CompNet. So if you want kind of support from GB with pursuing competition, you've got to support the GB tournaments, which kind of makes sense. But I don't suppose, like a lot of people maybe think, oh, I couldn't be an ambassador because, you know, but it's probably through lack of us pushing the knowledge around it, like you say, and obviously pushing the sport of those comps. So,
because when the ambassadors were announced today, it seems like it's particularly like a few schools that have many ambassadors, probably because they just do it well. Like
they know they've done it for year on year, and
yeah.
they like know the system. They know the schools they need to go. The competitions they need to go to, and I suppose once that school has won it once, then there's like an appetite for it. Then isn't there? Do you know what I mean? Like other people, I could win it. So then, it kind of takes you to step out and go for it.
The ambassadors were cool. What I liked about the ambassador stuff today was there was you could see like some of the like really younger kids, like how much it like that the girl who got I think like she was kind of nervous to come up and give a speech. I was like, oh, that's pretty hard for a little girl to come up and give a speech to a room full of adults she doesn't know or anything. But
she did really well, and then she kind of her emotions got a bit much for her, but she did good. Yeah,
seeing those guys kind of just how much growth I know like it'll give someone of that age to be able to do something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Really cool. So that was another good bit. We talked about like in the business conference about digital marketing and stuff. I found that quite interesting. That was more of an interesting part for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it was interesting, particularly seeing like how Simon and those guys are doing it, and then listening to like kind of like you saying almost you doing the reverse of it, but with similar things, but same results. Do you know what I mean? Sorry, different things, same results. If that makes sense. So there's more than one way to skin a cat in there, if that makes sense. But yeah.
I think there was just so much that you want to do as well, because I remember Craig Jones and Keenan Cornelius did a podcast recently.
I listened to that, it was good.
And Legion has 600 students, right? And but they have 1,100 Google reviews. So it's like, well, we're not too crazy far off 600 students, but we have 166 or something like Google reviews. So like they're doing something, whatever it is, to get.
Like, I imagine with a school like Legion, they have a high turnover of visitors.
Yes.
So I reckon there's like an opportunity there to capture reviews of visiting students. So
I think like, you know, if we've got, I don't know, let's just say 300 kids or something, well, that's 600 parents that could potentially do
that's a good point.
A review. And, you know, you think some of the most highest reviewed or highly reviewed things are restaurants. And people give a Google review to a restaurant based on one visit, you know, one experience. You know, not like they've tried the whole menu, being there for multiple months at a time. Whereas, you know, if someone's a student at GBRL or GB Harrogate, they come in like, you know, multiple times a week for months and months and years. But sometimes that person still hasn't given you like a little review on Google.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd never really thought about it like that. That's a good point. How would you then suggest to prompt those people in a polite way and kind of give them the help us out, leave us a Google review without badgering them? Yeah,
I think the easy way is also the way it isn't going to work, which is you stick an email marketing thing on, which is what we do now.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you've been a member a month, then leave us a Google review. I think it's better, and we'll probably do this in the group chat at some point, just be like a personal video from me or Mike or something being like, hey, look, we're already part of this great community, but I need your help to like make it even better and grow it. And part of that is letting other people in the world know, like, this is a cool place to be, like, because people are going to look on Google, and if you see a place has only got 100 views, and then the restaurant below it, say other brands got like 1,000 reviews, like, oh, it's interesting, like the disparity between things. So I think just having that personal touch, I think it's asking people in person, like, hey, like, here all the time, have you left us a Google review? Like, would you mind if I send you the link personally? Just like, don't literally take all the work out of it for you, like any effort. Like, if you've got to do is click a link and write something, then it's hard to argue with it, I think.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Whereas if it's just like what we do now, is
an email that gets lost in
an email, I'll do that later, or if there's a QR code to scan the academy, which we do, it's like I'll get around to that at some point, or it's just it becomes wallpaper. It's like you don't even see it anymore for a while. So that was something I wanted to do. I remembered that I wanted to do these user-generated content, like getting our students to make blog posts about their experience in Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Which I think is still actually a good idea, even after ChatGPT, because for a lot of blogs now, you could just get ChatGPT to write whatever you want. Oh, I need a blog post about injuries in Jiu-Jitsu. ChatGPT, I need a blog post about injuries in Jiu-Jitsu. I'll write it a little bit different.
I've never had any experience with ChatGPT.
Oh, I'll help you out with some ChatGPT. It's a time saver.
When we put out for the new PD role, Khalil reckoned that one of the CVs that had come in had been written by ChatGPT. Really? It was like this 19-year-old kid who'd applied.
Yeah.
And I read it and I was like, wow, that's a great CV. And then Khalil was like, it's got the signs of ChatGPT all over it. Like, and then I couldn't work out whether I was disappointed because he'd not put the effort in to write it, or I was impressed because he had the initiative to use it. Yeah, it's funny. Well, a lot of people say that's the way it's going, but then I kind of think it's almost like the dumbing down of society a little bit, we still need to be able to write things and think things and do things, but
I think it's just a tool to do those things
for
me.
Quicker.
Like if I could spend 20.
But you've lived in a time where you've had to do it, is my point. It's like you've been through the process of knowing how to do it yourself. But in the future, it will never be a thing that somebody has done themselves unless they purposefully do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get you. To my original point, like, someone, like, the blog post we were getting to write was like your first experience in Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. And they could have wrote about anything, but I just prompted them to like, look, if you can't think of anything, do your first experience in Jiu-Jitsu. Or if there's like a memorable moment you've had on the mat that wasn't, just like write about that.
Yeah.
And that's like, you can't, you could have there's a certain realism about it that ChatGPT could write, but it loses a bit of it when it's a real person gone through like a real thing and you can relate to it. You got their face next to it on the blog post. There's a picture of them training.
And it's in their words, in how they would say it,
and hopefully then that person is like quite proud that they have written something that they want to stand behind, and we'll post it for them on our socials and on our website, and they can share that with their friends. And that's obviously a good tool for us as a business to then get new members potentially. So I always come out of these things with loads of good ideas. It's just then sometimes
it's trying to implement them. Yeah, we were saying that, weren't we?
Because as soon as we go back, it's firefighting again with normal day-to-day coaching, class preps, which I guess Mike was talking about. It's good to be working on the business where you can kind of have these higher level ideas, but not necessarily doing the day-to-day.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult, isn't it? Finding the balance. Mike's done that pretty well. I struggle with that somewhat sometimes. I feel like we're probably getting there, closer to getting to that point now. But definitely it'd be like there's loads of things that we wanted to do for years, and I often think that I was saying to you before, you just need to get started. Stop thinking about planning it to be perfect and just build the momentum, get going, and then kind of roll with it from there.
conference aside, you had the 6-year anniversary seminar.
Yeah, that was great. Loved it.
What was some of your favourite parts about that? Like, what do you think you'll remember in a few years' time from it?
Do you know, it was like, it was really nice to give out, like, I've only given out 7 purple belts. So I really enjoyed giving Dave Lane and Bushy their purple belts. That kind of meant a lot.
For you, what was the criteria for giving someone a purple belt?
Oh, you put me on the spot there.
Listen in the blue belts.
Do you know what? It's different. Do you know, it's interesting you say that, because the 2 people that I gave purple belts to, both are like completely different. You know, there's probably more than 10 years in between them both. Bushy kind of helps out with the coaching. Dave isn't really involved with the coaching, but he's like a solid practitioner. He's there all the time. I think once you reach purple belt, you need to have kind of embraced jiu-jitsu as part of your lifestyle. I think it goes from being like bit of a hobby that you just kind of do every now and then. And, you know, I think you can pretty much get to blue belt by being like that, where you kind of show a bit of commitment. But 1 to 2 years to get your blue belt, it's short in the jiu-jitsu journey, right? So it's an achievable goal for most people. I think it's like a deeper show of commitment to make it to the purple belt. So I think you've got to have weathered a few plateaus, kind of shown that you've kind of well-rounded in all areas. And I think pretty much that's it, really. Like, well-rounded, good person, good team member, willing to show other people and give other people your time. And sort of like coaching stuff aside, I don't really factor that in. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, if they do it, it's great, but kind of more benchmark it on there, really.
So you kind of have a look at it as also like how much they've embraced jiu-jitsu as well, though. Like,
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's kind of how has it impacted their life, and what is it? How have they taken it on? Does that make sense? I don't really know if I'm articulating that very well, but I always used to think, you know, like someone who trains maybe just twice a week, they're going to get their purple belt eventually. But most people who get to purple belt don't just train twice a week. So then you see that they've made a consistent change and commitment to making jiu-jitsu part of their life. And then obviously they've got to represent kind of like what our club stands for. Do you know what I mean? Like I think Mike always says, you know, when he gives out a belt in invisible ink, his name is on that belt. And that's, I feel same way. Like, I'm not going to give somebody who I don't kind of share the same values as.
Yeah. And I guess like the people at the academy ultimately, you know, if they had opposing values or didn't live by at least similar values, you'd probably just ask them to leave anyway. Like if someone
I've never had to ask someone to leave, but you can see the people that they don't share those values. They know that they don't necessarily fit in, and they have a choice. They either mold to see that that's like the way things are, or they decide it's not for them. And if they decide that, then that's good for them. They've made a good decision that's like right for that person. Or maybe it's not right for them, and then they go off and then they change their mind and they come back. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What would you say your criteria for a purple belt is?
Man, I don't know. I've only ever given out 1 blue belt, so I'm not sure for purple belt. When I think about when I've trained with purple belts as opposed to blue belts, I think they're just an all-round more competency. Like, they don't necessarily, like, I can train with blue belts who will have like really good guard games, but if you pass their guard, they kind of fall apart a little bit. Or they'll have really good top games, but then on the bottom position, they don't maybe know exactly, like, they'll whereas I think when I roll with purple belts, there's no necessarily
shouldn't be as many gaps.
Yeah, there's like, you know, maybe their gaps are harder to see, because it's like, you know, whatever they're weak at isn't as obvious as just like, oh, you can get past their guard and they kind of will. Or it's like, so I think You know what? There's a funny one. I'm not sure if this is more just to do with the people I've rolled with that have been purple belts, but like when I roll with blue belts for the first time, usually it tends to be like a harder, like they go more intense. And every time I meet a new purple belt and roll with them, usually it's a fairly more like friendlier kind of chilled out roll.
They've got a little bit more control and a little bit more. I feel like maybe they've got like less to prove, maybe. Or
it's got, like, not to say like down the line we won't have a harder round, but like the first round is almost just like we're having a handshake and it's just like, oh yeah, let's feel each other out kind of a little bit. But in terms of criteria, it's not really something I've even started to think about.
It's interesting because I think the standard is better now than it was. Like I've given purple belts to people that I genuinely believe are better purple belts than what I was when I got my purple belt. I'm kind of proud of that because I feel like we've been able to provide an environment where they've got there quicker, and when they've got there, they're more well-rounded because of the structure.
Something interesting you said, because Professor Lewis got his second degree on his black belt the other day, was you said to Victor, you feel like you're a much better practitioner of jiu-jitsu now than you are when you got your black belt, right? So if you'd like beat up your black belt self right now kind of thing, your day you got your black belt, how does it make it more difficult for you to judge when someone else is ready because you might judge them against yourself now? Like, let's say it's you and Luke, right? And you're judging Luke against yourself now, who's a second degree black belt, been about 6 years. If you're judging against him, if it was Luke kind of versus you on the day you got your black belt, like would you judge him differently?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's potentially, yeah. What I was going to say there before is like I think now like I've grown into my black belt much more. I feel when I first got my black belt, I kind of was a bit sheepish, not sheepish about it, but I was kind of like felt like I was just touching it, and then I kind of matured into the belt. I really pushed my own maybe like learning and competition stuff a lot more. But what's interesting is when I got my black belt, I didn't think I was that good. I definitely thought when I was a blue belt, I was probably better. Like when I think back, when I was a blue belt, I was like, I am in at jiu-jitsu. And then like when you're a black belt, you realise like I even think now like probably my mindset when I was a 21-year-old blue belt, even then it's probably thought back then I was better than I am now. But yeah, maybe. I think like for example with Luke, like Luke could be a black belt, 100%.
Yeah.
But he's 24 years old. Like he's only been a brown belt, there's no rush for him. He's not in a rush. Kind of think it's a big belt, isn't it? And you're going to be on there a long time. And I think to get the black belt, I feel you have to have almost moved past the point of it being about a belt to the point of where it's like, I'm going to get there at some point. But even if I didn't, I would still be doing jiu-jitsu. And that's how I felt when I got my black belt. I kind of had accepted when I didn't get my black belt at the same time as Mike and Adam. The initial response was like, I feel a bit disappointed. I was happy for them, but then but then it kind of sent me on this path of, that maybe wasn't, kind of like the goalpost had been moved. I was like, I best just get focusing on getting good at getting better at jiu-jitsu. And it's probably the best thing that happened for me, really.
Do you think the belt system is a net positive or a net negative in jiu-jitsu?
It's a good question. I think for you've asked me a question like I don't really know. I think for me personally, I'm not fussed about the belts. Like I won't be mind if they stripped out the belt system because I just love grappling and jiu-jitsu. As a tool for measuring people's progress and giving people the reward that maybe they need to, for the general person, if that makes sense, or like most people, like they want some form of recognition, even if it's hard to achieve. Everybody wants that kind of thing. So yeah, I do think it's good. It's good for that. It's definitely great for the kids. I'm glad that we don't have child black belts like some martial arts. I think that's important, and I hope that always stays.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm not sure because like coming up in Thai boxing, that doesn't have like a really a real belt system. Like some people implement one.
Like a sash system, is it?
Yeah, I mean, like people give like the armband, the monk crew kind of stuff. But I'm not sure. I think, when there's not a belt system, then literally the focus is just get skills. Like,
Well, what I always think is, I always say, people need the belts to give them targets and goals, right? But people play five-a-side football for years. And why do they go and do that? Because they enjoy playing football.
It's fun, right? Yeah.
Like, they're not necessarily competing. They're just going to play football, or they're going to think. So I think the introduction of a belt system can give you this, like, say, almost like a false hierarchy sometimes. Because, and the other thing that you do when you introduce the belt system is that you create this thing there when the people place a level of expectation on themselves of how quick they should achieve something or how fast they should achieve something. That maybe becomes the focus over the actual thing that they're doing.
Yeah. On that Craig Jones and Keenan podcast, he made a really good point about how like chess players have their chess rating.
Right.
And that's how they're actually like, that's how you're ranked essentially in chess. And, if you beat someone else who's got a higher rating than you, then you'll overtake them in the ratings. And everyone right down from high school kids have like
A rating.
a rating based on like your competition kind of thing. And he's saying like for jiu-jitsu we should have that because there's people like Joseph Chen who's been training 3 years and will go win ADCC trials. Or there's like guys who've been training 10, 15 years competing like at a similar level. So it's like hard to say. Like, why are we judging it on the belt necessarily? Because there's obviously such a big disparity between what a skill level could be at a certain belt that for at least like the pro competitors like have a
separate ranking system.
Yeah. I mean, obviously at the hobbyist level, like the belt system works pretty good. Like it's just like he's a blue belt, you're a blue belt, you're about the same weight, say same size. Like let's just go for it. You'll probably be somewhat even. But if you're a pro competitor, then. And don't worry about the belts. Just like what's your ranking like?
Yeah.
Okay, you beat the last 5 people you beat were over this rating. The last person
is that similar to what Who's Number One try and do, like with their pound for pound rankings?
I'm not sure.
Or do they just like make that up?
I think the guys just make that up. Yeah, based on who's popular.
Yeah. Who's popular? Who's selling them the most content?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a good question, that though. I mean, I don't think it's going anywhere, the belt system.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
We've had this conversation before about, do you think that no gi and gi can coincide in the same school, like in the future, equal levels? Or do you think that you'll have to choose a path one day, be like, look, we are predominantly gi school and we have a bit of no gi, or we're a no-gi school and we have a bit of gi? Or you can be 50-50.
You could... So, almost like the adults program and the kids program are almost like separate entities in a way.
Yeah.
Like the support they need and what you need to do around them are almost separate. But they still exist at the same school.
Yeah.
And I almost see gi and no-gi a bit like that. The difference is you tend to compete for the same time slot. So if there's only certain... noon class, and then there's like the morning class slots, and then there's the 6 and 7 p.m. evening class slots, which sounds like a lot, but in a week's worth of training split between beginners, intermediate, and advanced, and then if you go no-gi, beginners, intermediate, advanced, like there's not actually a lot of time to get everything that you might want to do on a curriculum,
unless you had more
like mat spaces. So I think. If you could operate, but it'd almost be like operating 2 separate businesses in a way.
Yeah, because I've often thought that, like, if we had a more decked out no-gi curriculum, what would I do if somebody only wanted to train no-gi? Well, obviously, the Gracie Barra method is that we only grade people based on their attendance of gi classes, which for me, I take people as their grappling ability. So if somebody can put a gi on and then they're like kick your butt in a gi, thing. But would you have people coming in being like, you almost have like an
Yeah, I guess kind of the no-gi thing is almost like unranked jiu-jitsu in a way, because and now it's fairly common to see no-gi guys even just get a belt even if they never really train in the
Yeah.
gi. Like, I know,
Would you do that?
I don't think we would at GBRL, but I don't necessarily have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I think though in the future, and I think in the very near future, it'll be seen as such different sports, and they probably should be, like, in a way, like just with like Keenan rebranding is like it's American Jiu-Jitsu, or a lot of it just called like submission grappling now rather than no-gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah. Would you feel like if that did happen, would you like feel like you wanted to incorporate that to keep some submission grappling? I think I would, because I enjoy it myself.
I think I'm not precious about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for any kind of particular reason. If a new martial art got invented tomorrow that had the efficacy of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and had the values that I like, and had the all the other components, and I felt it was better, I'd be doing that martial art. Like, there's nothing. I'm not precious about the history or the kind of thing of it. If martial arts X got created tomorrow, I felt like it was like what jiu-jitsu, whatever it is, if it's grappling, it probably would be grappling type thing, but it was made by someone else and this is their system, then I'd go do that. And but as a point to that though, like, jiu-jitsu is so broad, like it's hard to say it's hard to really define what Brazilian jiu-jitsu is.
Do you think it will lose the Brazilian at some point? Do you think Gracie Barra will drop the Brazilian jiu-jitsu and just go to jiu-jitsu again? Because it started out as jiu-jitsu, didn't it? I think I think the history is, they called it Brazilian jiu-jitsu to kind of like not be infringing on Gracie jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. I don't think it is what. I think what they actually do is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, I think, is something different. I think Gracie Jiu-Jitsu became what mixed martial arts is now. Like, it was just like the
Vale Tudo style.
Yeah, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu became the non-strike, like,
sporting aspect.
Yeah, I think the Jiu-Jitsu they were doing in the 70s and 80s and super early 90s wasn't really the jiu-jitsu that came out in the 2000s and after that. I think, and now I think, like, to the question, I'm not sure if the no-gi submission grappling game is so different that it would warrant a name change, but I kind of think it might. I think any small change of a rule set makes a big difference in the sport that you do.
Yeah.
Gaelic football to normal football, like, you're still playing with a ball, or like basketball to football. Like, it's like to an alien from space, it's like, oh, there's a lot of people on a pitch and they've got a ball. But like to us, it's like, no, they're completely different sports.
That makes sense.
Because the rules are different. I think I totally continue to see them being taught in the same schools, but I can see why schools like 10th Planet also took off and stuff with a no-gi only offering. I think no-gi's more convenient.
Yeah, it's less washing.
Yeah. I actually think do you think it's better for beginners as well, though?
It's probably a lower barrier to entry and more, like, relatable.
Do you think it's more initially? You can, like, I think it's hard to understand what necessarily a gi grip is doing, but if I grab the back of your head, like for a collar tie, I kind of know what you're trying to do with it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's interesting. I didn't used to really like no-gi. I didn't do no-gi like for years, and then the last couple of years I've really like really enjoyed it. Pretty much competing exclusively in no-gi now.
I don't get to train as much of it as I was like, but funnily enough, I study way more no-gi than I do.
Yeah, well, I think that's why I kind of fell in love with it again, because I felt like that was my biggest opportunity for a learning curve in no-gi. So kind of made me feel a bit like a beginner again. Mm-hmm. Whereas I could learn all about, leg locks and improving my wrestling and all these things maybe that I hadn't looked into when I was in the gi.
Yeah, I think, and just the instruction around the no-gi seemed like just, I'm not sure if gi's really even caught up now, but the instruction around the no-gi stuff seemed like it was just miles ahead of.
Oh, you mean like the produced content?
Yeah. Like Gordon stuff, like Danaher stuff, like Lachlan Giles' stuff.
Yeah.
Like predominantly it's no-gi related.
Yeah.
I think bringing back around, one of the cool things though is people doing well at the CompNet will, if they win like CompNet World or something, would have a chance to make a curriculum on GB Online.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Because I think, I don't know why, but like if I was ahead of GB Online, I'd be like refreshing those curriculums, once every 2-3 years. Like, GB1 curriculum's been the GB1 curriculum for ages now. I think like.
Do you think that they'll ever change that? I think it's kind of like, is it not immortalised in time because the kind of respect for Master Carlos?
Yes, but I don't think that's the right. I don't think you should do something just because it's followed, like just because of the tradition. I think tradition is important, but I don't think it should be important at the detriment of
what's relevant.
Yeah, and like what's best for the actual individual. So like, if it's best for the individual now that as in like the student, that the GB1 program is updated, so someone maybe with a different understanding of what the modern day school is like, and being someone who's probably still in the trenches of teaching day-to-day beginner students, whoever that is in GB, making their own version of GB1, and then the school owner and head instructor can be like, these are my GB1 curriculums. Like, I'm going to teach, well, at this school we teach Draculino's GB1. Or just like in the same with GB2, you've got Victor's Rodrigo Fajardo, yeah. And then you've got Henrique Machado for the takedowns one. He's got Roberto Alancaz for the no-gi. Or for GB3, you have Marcio Fatoza and Flavio's.
Yeah.
And what they should really do with the no-gi GB1 curriculum.
Yeah, I've badgered Victor about that a few times.
And I think they eventually will, but they'll be 10 years behind when they should have done it.
Yeah, I think it will happen eventually, but it's I think the GB1 could kind of be updated a little bit, but do you
think that there's some techniques in the GB1 I'm like, well, I'm not sure if Master Carlos is a genius and he's dumbed this down to like such a level that it's super accessible but would never actually really work in jiu-jitsu. Cause actually this week I'm like, one of his back takes is like, it's not really very good, and he kind of finishes in a weird position where he's like pulled him on top of him, and he's like chest to back, and his back's like flat on the floor. And he like reaches for a far side Kimura, like the far side cuff grip, without really even moving around the body too much first.
Right.
I'm like, well,
I think there's a little bit of their like appreciation around his age when he filmed that, and then I think there is obviously he's dumbed it down a little bit. I think I've asked Victor questions like that before, and then he's kind of shown me how it links to other things. Does that make sense? So I think interestingly, you're saying about putting the back flat. Is it Master Carlos is pulling the person on top of him, or is the person driving into him? And the problem with the GB1 I've found is there's only bullet point information. There's no context around what he's shown. So I I think sometimes when you have more context around, right, everything in the GB1 to me, in my mind, is you have to frame the situation really well.
Yes.
Because the technique and the technique is kind of quite basic or fundamental, but then the follow-up information is like very limited, isn't it? So whereas, you know, if you can show something really basic and maybe three or four components to the move, but if you put the reason that I'm flat on my back and I'm putting the hooks in is because when I took the person's back, one reaction they might give is planting their feet and driving back into me and trying to get their back flat. And then that makes it really easy for me to put my hooks in and to, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like you can explain how that situation occurs.
Yes. I think like to your point there, though, it's like when the GB1 is the most rigid of the curriculum, that, you know, you don't want to, well, on the ICP, it's like don't kind of flex the GB1 curriculum, but when it comes to GB2, like you got a bit more leeway, and especially in GB3, like you can, you know, pretty much keep it on the topic of the week, but you can, if you want to show something else, show something else. You would think that the GB1 then would have the most support in terms of
you would
information around it. See, I mean, I still think we were talking earlier today about how, you know, Time Champions and LC1 are almost just like foundation classes just to get you in, you know, to get you into LC2, which is pretty much become like a mini adult class, like, you know, in the way it's structured, at least for us. And Time Champs and LC1, it's like we're playing games because we want you to love jiu-jitsu first and foremost. It's fun. You know, don't want you to see it as like a chore to come to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And we're going to give you like the really good building blocks. So when you get into the LC2 and Jiu-Jitsu Teens program, there's no like real super hard learning curve. You already know what it's like to be in the class. You already know all the values we're going to talk about. You already know things like the warm-up. You already know like the main positions in jiu-jitsu. So it's just about now just building onto that to become like a really good at jiu-jitsu. So I think that's similar in the GB1 program, where it's like, I'm not trying to make you like a world champion at GB1.
No.
I'm trying to get you to like learn the basic. I'm not even trying to really teach them techniques. I'm trying to get them to like understand jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like
the reason, the why, the bit of like, where do I go from here to there?
Yeah.
Why am I going from there to there? All that kind of stuff.
For me, it's like I'm teaching them the language of jiu-jitsu, I'm teaching them the alphabet, so that when they get to more like sporting type classes, or they get to live train, they can understand what they're doing more. So I'm like, now more than ever, I've done my classes down, because it's like, I want to, like you were talking about earlier, it's like for the all level class, speaking to like the lowest common denominator in the room.
Yeah.
Like whoever's, I might be Professor Simon. Like, you know, you can't just say the word crossface and just assume everyone knows what it means. Like,
but that's why for me it's been important for us to move away from these all level classes at our busiest times. Yeah. Because I feel like I always think of a school as like over time you obviously build depth to the programs. So you introduce your GB2s and your GB3s when it's needed, not necessarily like, you know, it's pointless having classes with no one in them. Yeah. But then when they get there, they need to be the right classes for those people. Mm-hmm. That's what was happening with us with the all-level stuff, was that we'd have 35, 40 people maybe come to that class because it was an all-levels class. And maybe half of them would be in their first month or 2 months of jiu-jitsu, and then you might have a load of blue and purple belts up the other end. And effectively, you can't just leave the people that have been there 2 weeks with, and you can't start showing stuff that's only relevant to the higher grades. Yeah. And then the higher grades feel like, every class I go to, you know, like every class I'm going to is kind of all centered around the beginner. So exactly that, like it's better to be able to have the separation so that you can tailor the information to the right people. And I think another thing that we're all guilty of sometimes is exactly what you said there, is oversharing information that maybe the person's not yet ready to receive. We all want to get across how much we know, like when we're teaching a technique. Yeah. But actually, like I started challenging myself to stay within the demonstration script timeline. It's quite hard.
Oh yeah, like the 4.
Yeah, it's quite difficult.
I think they've maybe even upped it to 5 again.
Yeah, it's like 4 or 5 minutes. It's like GB2, it's like quite difficult. GB1, I think I'm like pretty concise. And the reason is that I like to just get people doing the technique as quick as possible.
Yes,
So
I'm same.
So now I'm like, right, guys, this is what it looks like. I'm going to tell you a few key things. Go and try it, and then if I see any things, we'll circle back up, and then we get back to it.
Yeah.
And it's like, because I'm saying about this tiny little detail about a grip here, they've forgotten the last 5 things I just said about that. And then they go back, like, what did I do there? It's like, no, this. Go do it. Come back with any questions, and then we'll talk about the whys and the things. I think I got that off you, actually, from talking to you probably like a year ago when you were saying about like letting people figure out the problems for themselves and things.
Yeah. I think I was the most guilty of that. I think I remember the conversation on my first class I taught in like GB1 at Round Day, and Mike was there, and it was I don't remember the exact week, but it's the one where you teach the triangle, the Kimura, and the hip bump sweep in the same class, which are like big techniques. Those are like those are like big foundational techniques.
Yeah, because people can spend a whole class not getting the triangle.
Yeah. So like I was there, and I was given. I remember I watched like all of Danaher's Kimura video and all of it, which is like 8 hours long, and all of his triangular one and the close guard series to teach just one class.
That's funny. So, that's some commitment.
Yeah,
though,
it was like it was like a full week of like watching Danaher on teaching these techniques, and it got to it, and I was like teaching pull based Kimuras and putting your thigh on over their hands so they can't grab their own thigh, and like this is a GB1 class in a new school where it's like
that's funny.
and they're like, what the fuck's a Kimura?
That's it. So it's almost like your desire to share that information, it's like lost on them, and almost it can have the opposite effect of making them feel bad about themselves. What the fuck? I don't know what's going on, or Jack is really good at prepping for his classes. Like he puts an awful lot of time and energy in. That was kind of one of the feedback points we'd had previously before. It's like, and after that he tamed it down a bit, but I think when you're new to coaching, it's almost like a self-validation thing of, I've got to get this across so they know that I know what I'm talking about. And then eventually you realise what's actually just best for them.
For me, it was always like, well, my word it doesn't mean anything because I'm not going like battle tested these techniques in competition. But if I'm just saying verbatim what Danaher says, and then if anyone questions on me, I'm like,
this is
that's literally what Danaher said. So like,
it's got to be right.
I don't know better than him, and I'm pretty sure you probably don't know better than him, right? So like, so there's like no one can really question me. Like even if Mike pulled me up on something, I'd be like, well, actually, like, me and Mike disagree on how you finish the triangle. So like, but I teach the way Danaher teaches it. So
go on, share the details.
I did. I mean, you can actually catch it in a Google Drive because I taught a workshop on it. But Mike doesn't like to scoop the leg, and
helps you cut the angle though.
Yeah, it helps you cut the angle, but also prevents a lot of the escapes.
Yeah, I like a lot of them lifting you up, stepping over.
Yeah, any kind of them like getting the angle or forcing themselves too far through or stacking you. He prefers to like kind of pull down the head, but it doesn't really stop them lifting their hips and throwing their legs over for like the cross leg kind of escape.
All right, okay.
Or cutting angles. So it does increase the strangulation power, Danaher argues, but it doesn't really stop them escaping.
So it's kind of like both kind of work.
Yeah, and that's why I say it. Like whenever I teach it, I'm like, he's not wrong.
Mike's just got better quads than you, bro. He finishes them off easy. That's funny.
If he wasn't as strong, I'd get him.
Yeah, that's funny.
Well, look, it's late.
It's way past my bedtime.
Yeah, I mean, this is the latest you've been up in a while, I bet.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for listening to us ramble about instructor talks.
Thanks for having us.
And we'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.